Hello and welcome to today's session where we will be discussing succession planning and bench strength in times of uncertainty and ambiguity. You may be familiar with research indicating that 50% of leaders fail, and leadership failure is a significant financial and reputational risk for organisations. So what can we do to outrun these statistics and increase the chances of success, especially in the context of so much global uncertainty and economic instability? Today, we're going to explore a pathway from managing leadership in context. We're going to be talking about moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to leadership to a context-specific leadership profiles approach, from static leadership profiles to agile leadership processes, and from decisions based on intuition and experience to decisions based on data-driven intelligence. Before we get started, I will run you through some practicalities so we all know what to expect from today's session. So in total, today's webinar will run for around 60 minutes and we will save some time towards the end to answer any questions that you do have. The session will be recorded and we will share this session with you on email afterwards. You will note that you are muted throughout this session, but as I say, please do ask any questions that you have, go onto the chat or the question and answer box and post those, and we will try and address as many as possible on today's webinar. If we don't get through all of the questions, we will follow up with you via email after today's session. We have been running these sessions around the world, and most recently we ran this session in the APAC region, and we had lots and lots of questions. And then when we've run follow-on sessions in EMEA, we have had less questions. So I am challenging you today to buck the trend and post lots of questions. It's really great if we can see what's going on. If there's anything that's resonating with you, please do comment. If there is anything that you have questions about, please do go on and comment. We would love to hear what's happening for you today. As I say, the session is recorded and we will share this recording with you following today's session. So let me introduce myself. I'm Lucy Beaumont and I'm the Global Talent Management Solution Lead here at SHL. And I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague Stefania. So Stefania, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Lucy. I've been working for many years in SHL and on this topic, so I'm very glad to be here today with you and to share some of our interesting, I think, insights with all of the participants that we have today.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm so grateful that you're joining us today. As somebody that works across the EMEA region, it's great to have you on the call so that you can tell us what's going on with your clients and give us some real feedback specific to this region today. So what have we got planned for today's session? We've got 3 topics that we're going to be moving through. We're going to start by talking about what is succession planning and how do you build your bench strength. Then we're going to look at the importance of context in succession planning, and we at that point going to draw on some of our global research at SHL to put that into practice for you. And then finally, we're going to show you how we work with organisations to increase the chances of creating a really strong leadership bench strength for the future. So without much further ado, I will hand over to you, Stefania, to get us started on succession planning and building your bench strength.
So thanks, Lucy. So let's first focus on the planning aspects and how do we plan successors for the key roles in the business? At what point should we start succession planning? So let's start thinking about what we mean by succession planning. What we are talking about in an organizational strategy to identify and prepare people to take on responsibilities of top leadership position in an organization. So no matter what the organization, in which organization you are or what country you are, in industry, the size, it's universal truth that people in critical roles of the business will leave. In fact, each year, 10 to 15% of businesses must appoint a new CEO. So how do we do this in such a way that we are not at risk of losing critical knowledge, for example, experience? We don't risk having a key position and field, for example, and that we can ensure that objectives are met, productivity is maintained and employees are not impacted. So for most organizations, the process starts after 2-3 years before key roles are vacated to ensure knowledge transfer and to create a smooth transition at the end. So even prior to the preparation phase, we need to identify a pool of talent or bench strengths to take on these top roles. So a study of the world's 2,500 largest companies, public companies, shows that companies that scramble to find replacement for departing CEOs forgot an average of 1.8 billion in shareholder value. So this is huge. More research still show that the longer it takes a company to name a new CEO during succession crisis, well, the worse it is subsequently performs relative to its peers. So it's really, it's critical to get it right. And yet CEOs are being replaced badly. So boards are not finding the right people for the job, and estimates suggest that up to 40% of new CEOs in position fail to meet performance expectation in the first 18 months. So in fact, most organizations around the globe, succession planning isn't going very well. For all the planning that we put into succession planning, it doesn't seem to be working. In 2021, for example, only 11% of companies, of organizations believe that they had a strong bench strength. Well, this is a 10-year low. And without a strong bench, organization will struggle to put the best people into the top and most important job, and fulfill most important jobs in the organizations. So what we want to hear from you really what is how confident you are in succession planning in your organization. So let's see how the audience replies to to the poll. Here you have some options. So we want to know if you're confident that we have a strong bench for all of the roles, if you're confident that we have a strong bench for most of the roles, or that you have some but not really confident in terms of quality, not confident at all. Maybe you're buying these talent for the CEOs from the outside. So here is the poll. You should see it on screen now. So let's see.
Yeah, I don't know what you're seeing in the EMEA market.
We are seeing the poll now.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say what I see around the globe, and I think it probably resonates very much in EMEA, but is actually somewhere around B or C. We've got bench strength, but we don't really trust the quality of it. Perhaps we don't think it's diverse. Perhaps it's based on manager ratings or leader ratings, and perhaps it's lacking a little bit of objectivity. So many clients that come to talk to SHL are probably somewhere around that today, I would say, but I don't know what you see specifically in EMEA, but it'd be really interesting to see what our audience today are finding. So we'll just give it another few seconds, I think, and then we will close the poll to get your answers in. I mean, the gold standard has got to be that you're confident that you have a strong bench strength for all roles in the organisation. If you're in that place, then I think you're doing a lot better than many organisations around the world today. So I think we should be getting our poll results in.
Yes, we have the results now. We have the results now. So we have bench strengths, but not confident in the quality. It appears like the situation here and how people are confident. So we have a large amount of people that are not confident, 33%, not confident at all, 29%, but we also have 29% that says that they are confident that have some bench strength for some of the roles. So again, I think this confirms what we see in other countries, in other regions, Lucy.
Absolutely, and I think that's why people are here today, to learn a little bit about how can we be a little bit more confident, how can we be a little bit more intentional and intelligent around bench strength and planning. Great, thank you for answering the poll. That was really great to see what's coming in.
So let's see now, let's talk about where do we start with succession planning. So succession planning, it must come from an internal funnel of talent, unless the strategy is to buy successor from outside of the organization. So an approach that is much more expensive and much less successful from our experience. So whilst we talk about succession planning, this can happen in isolation. What are your talent pools that feed into your senior leadership suite? Where do your manager population come from? Or who within your individual contributors do you want to nurture has high potential for the future? So what I'm getting at here is that to be successful in succession planning, you need to think about your overall talent management strategy. You need to ensure that it is joined up, that it's based on objective data, and this is key really to make it work. To look at performance, to look at potential. Why am I calling this out? Well, there are two reasons. Traditionally in HR, it has been difficult, and by that I mean intensive, labor intensive and costly to collect talent data and deep in the organization and in a joined up fashion. So it's perhaps a shift in mindset. And second, this is your funnel for successors. So you could have the best succession planning process, development plans, assignment, for example, stretching goals. But if your bench strength isn't strong to start, it's never going to produce strong successors. So it's late to think about bench strength at when you're at that executive level. So good talent may have slipped through your fingers. Diverse talent may have been sifted out, and then you're left with a very narrow talent pipeline. So today, organizations aren't doing this well enough. So let me give you a little example of how I know that. So research shows, as you can see here, that firms with more women in senior positions are more profitable, more socially responsible, provide safer, higher quality customer experiences, for example, to name just a few benefits. So to be a successful organization, we need to have a diverse leadership across all fronts, but let's focus on gender diversity now. So for example, in 2020, a huge survey was undertaken called Women in the Workplace 2020, and it looked at 600 organizations and surveyed over 250,000 employees. They found that for every 100 men promoted to manager, only 85 women were promoted. So this gap is even larger for women of different ethnicity, for example. So in fact, in 2020, women held just 38% of managerial positions, while men held 62%. So if I'm building my succession planning on objective data of who will be a great leader, well, this would tell me that men are more likely to be great leaders than women, and that's why we are promoting more men than women. So yet the evidence shows that women outperform men on many leadership criteria. So a meta-analysis of 99 studies shows that women are rated by other people as significantly more effective leaders than men, although men are still men leaders rated themselves more highly than women did. So this is a very interesting results that we are seeing. So if we have diversity in the organization, why it's being stripped out as we move up in the organization? So this is exactly the opposite of what research and science are telling us. And I believe this is a real and a strong urgent issues for most of the organization. We know that diversity is good for business performance, shared value, creativity, as we mentioned before, social responsibility, and we know that we have diverse workforce lower down the funnel. What's happening then? If we know that women have have the same potential as men for leadership roles, why aren't we promoting them at the same rate? So we know the answer. It's because more business are relying on subjectivity, probably on biased opinions, and of who should be promoted, who has the high potential, and ultimately who would make the best leaders. So we need to start using data. We need to start to use analytics in place of subjectivities and subjectivity. And instead of biased opinions, relying on biased opinions. So from these examples, we can see how critical it is. In addition, we absolutely must use data and analytics as this is the key really to make the difference. So let's see when we are thinking about succession planning, we need to be thinking about talent management. So we need to think about all of the different activities, as you see here, that we do in talent management, and how we can collect objective, valid data, and all the way across the business. Particularly in light of the Great Resignation, we need to be thinking about how we retain talent across the business and nurture talent pipeline for future roles. So by the point that we start thinking intentionally about succession planning, organizations should have a wider data set of talent insights across the business. Those who have been nurtured up to succession planning stages should have been a diverse talent pool with strong potential to become a future leader within the organization. So as you can see, this is key as we move through the different stages. So we will have a more clear perspective of who we have and how to nurture these people and how to leverage on their strengths. So as you can see, it's key to have one source of reusable insight, really to find talent that in other ways we would have never thought to look at before in our pool. So just to make it a bit more interactive again, we would like to launch a new pool to you, so new questions. So we would like to ask you, where does your succession planning, succession pipeline come from? So think about your organization. So is it that you start nurturing talent from individual contributor level, or have high potential program to fit succession pipeline, or you buy again talents for senior roles more than look inside the organization or find them inside, or current leaders, managers at certain level are considered potential or still working on. So we would like to launch the pool. Here it comes. Now we can see the pool on the screen. So let's start vote and tell us something about your approach in your organization.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? A question when we ran this session in the Asia region was, how does high potential programs link to succession planning? And that's a really key, you know, are our processes aligned? What's the difference between a high potential program and a succession pipeline or bench strength, and how you're actually nurturing future successors for specific roles? And I think that there's a key difference there. High potential is looking at, do people have the potential to go on and execute at a higher position and more senior position in the business, whereas succession planning is really aligning individuals to future successor roles. So really developing them to become the next CMO, to take over specific roles. And that's where we get a bit more targeted and move away from this one size fits all of, do you have potential, to ask that question of potential for what? What are you going to be aligned to for the future? So it's interesting to think about, have you got high potential programs in place and how do they feed into those succession pipelines? Shall we go ahead, give you a few more seconds to answer this question? I quite like that we're working on it. I think that's when I talk to clients about lots of different talent management challenges, the answer is, in all honesty, we're working on it for lots of these things. We're trying to get better.
And we see the results now. We can see the results, Lucy. So we see that the majority of people are saying that we are working on it. So 37% of our of the people joining us today feels that they are still working on it. So this is very interesting. We have also 26% of people that are saying that we have hypo programs to feed succession lines. And also we start nurturing talent from individual contributor level for 16%, and then a residual for the two buying them outside, for example. So it's interesting because, as you said, most of the organizations feels that they're working on it, but not there yet. So this is where we're seeing. From my experience, I'm seeing this across different industries, different organizations. So it's really something that the organization, the HR, but not just the HR, also the business people, the business leaders, they feel that something is moving, something is there, but not yet what is really needed to have the right succession plan pipeline in the organization. To start building from the beginning. And this is a key point, because most of the time we see that one of the issues is that there is not a strong connection in the talent management activities really from the beginning to the successor identification.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like that's resonating with our audience today as well. So if you're working on it, let's see how we can help you to do that. So let's now assume that we do have strong and diverse bench strength. We've got our high potential programs in place. We know who our high potentials are. Now we need to think about how we start developing them for these specific future senior roles. So it's time to turn our attention to the power of context. So I'm going to start by talking, before we get into the research, about what we mean by context. Because what we mean by context is the contextual environment in which a leader operates. And we look at this across 4 spheres. We have the external environment in which we're operating. We have the organization, we have the team, and we have the role. So let's break that down. What do we mean? The context in terms of the external environment includes the country and the industry in which a leader works, and that's changing phenomenally at the moment for most people in terms of that external environment. What's the organizational context? Includes that those business priorities, the structure of the organization. Again, that's in flux for many companies today. Leaders are also influenced by their team context. What's the structure like within that team? What's the cohesion like? And that can be quite a tricky question to answer. But then also, what's the role context for that specific leader? What are the job characteristics that they are faced with? What are the psychological demands of the role that they are being faced with every day? Why is this important? The key roles that you're nurturing your bench strength for today will all look different along these 4 spheres, even within the same organization. In fact, the same job might look different at different points in time. So each leader is going to be tasked with different set of challenges in which they have to operate. And knowing the context in which a leader is likely to operate allows us to identify future leaders who have the potential and the experience to be able to navigate those contextual challenges that we anticipate that they are going to be faced with. Most organisations have some form of succession planning. In fact, leadership programmes account for a quarter of the annual HR budget for most organisations. And yet 75% of business units do not have the leaders in place. We believe that this is often because context isn't taken into account in leadership development. Many organisations that we speak to use a one-size-fits-all approach to leadership. And yet when context is incorporated, our research shows that we can improve the ability to predict leader performance by as much as 400%. This is not a small impact, this is 400%. When we take into context into account, we're making real differences about successful decisions around who to put in to which roles in our organisations. Right now, the future of work is uncertain. It is volatile, it is complex, and it is ambiguous. We've been through a global pandemic. We have seen and felt the Great Resignation. We've redesigned work to be remote or hybrid, and we have strong headwinds of financial recession in many parts of the world. If we look back 3 years, we have seen leaders having to respond to different types of challenges than ever before. The leaders that took us through these challenging times probably held the same job titles as their predecessors. Yet the challenges that they are faced with are likely significantly different. So what will our future leaders face? Gartner are reporting that most organisations expect more than 40% of leadership roles to be significantly different within 5 years. So right now, we're developing people for jobs that we don't know what they might entail or the context in which they will be operating. In fact, when we surveyed leaders, we found that they already felt that their jobs were more complex, more ambiguous, and had more responsibilities than ever before. 78% of leaders must work with more individuals. Teams are becoming broader, they are more agile, reporting lines are blurred, and the number of individuals that a leader needs to engage with today is much broader than ever before. 70% of leaders reported that they are having to adjust to more frequent changes than ever before. 63% reported that they need to depend on others in order to achieve their objectives. And 61% are managing more geographically dispersed teams today than ever before. Think about your organisation. Are these challenges that your leaders are facing? I would say there aren't many organisations that aren't seeing these changes going on right now. So what is this telling us? It's telling us that leadership is changing. It's becoming more complex and more demanding. So intuitively, we know that leaders have to operate in certain contexts, and intuitively, we can see that it's becoming increasingly difficult to predict the context in which a leader will operate in the future. But at SHL, we wanted to find out how much context really mattered and which contextual challenges mattered the most for leaders. So we did what we do best, and we conducted a 3-year study amongst 9,000 global leaders to find out what makes leaders successful today. And we found it. Spoiler alert, we've mentioned it already, but it's context. We discovered that when you take context into account, when you make a leadership mobility decision, you are 4 times more likely to make the right leadership mobility decision with context taken into account. And out of hundreds of combinations of work context, we found that there are 27 contexts that matter the most to making or breaking leaders' performance, up and down all levels of the corporate hierarchy. 27 leadership contexts that make the difference. So what are those 27 leadership contexts that you should be aware of and that you should be thinking about? You can see them on screen, and I'm not obviously going to talk through them all, but you can see we've categorized them under 4 headings. We've got driving performance, leading change, managing risk and reputation, and how we deliver our results. So these contexts are all happening across organizations, and it's about understanding these contexts and understanding which ones are hitting your leaders and which ones will be hitting your leaders in the future. So we use these 27 contexts to understand which ones are going to be relevant for specific roles, and this gives us a profile for each leader in the business. We can then look at our bench strength and see how well their attributes and their experiences align to each profile, to determine who would be best fit for each of these roles. and we use that to align people to different succession pathways. We can also think about what gaps do individuals have in relation to the role that they are being developed for, so that we can bridge those gaps, so that we can say you might not be ready today, but this is what you're going to be primed for in the future, and how do we get you there? How do we fill those gaps? How do we give you the right experiences to make sure that you are successful when you do move into these absolutely critical roles within your business? And we can also use these leadership profiles for scenario planning. So the future is uncertain, and perhaps in your business there are a number of scenarios that you are currently planning for. Whilst we can't be certain of the future, we can be agile and plan for different scenarios. And I'm going to come on to talk to you about how we do that at SHL. But just to reflect back on the research, how much can a leader handle? How many challenges is too many? When it comes to contextual leadership challenges, volume matters. The more contextual challenges a leader faces, the more likely he or she is to underperform. The reality is that most leaders face multiple challenges in any given roles. And of the 27 contextual challenges identified, we found that leaders at all levels navigate an average of 7 challenges simultaneously. This seems to be the sweet spot. We found that actually nearly a quarter are facing 9 or more challenges. That's probably bridging on too many. As I say, we recommend that leaders should aim to manage around 7 challenges in any given role. And much more than this, they're significantly more likely to fail. As you know, sometimes just this exercise of creating a leadership profile alone can be a light bulb moment for organisations that we work with, because they realise that some of their leaders are being faced with far too many challenges that they're trying to navigate today. They're essentially setting them up to fail. So then we might just step back and think about job design and restructuring roles so that we can drive success and set people up for success. Interestingly, our research also revealed that certain challenges are more consistently difficult for all leaders. So things like frequent leadership changes, high uncertainty, low collaboration or low support cultures, and high conflict cultures. These 4 have the strongest negative impact on leader performance. So of the leaders facing all 4 of these challenges at the same time, a huge percentage, nearly 68%, struggle with performance issues. So given the undermining impact of contextual challenges on leader performance, organisations need to invest time in measuring and understanding the challenges at work for their leaders. What we're driving at here with this research is that context-specific profiles are much more powerful than generic one-size-fits-all leadership profiles for predicting leader effectiveness. So although there are certain attributes and behaviours such as conscientiousness that we know can contribute to leaders' performance in most contexts, there is no single universal or best profile for effective leadership across all contexts. Rather, the ideal mix of traits depends on the situation and the contextual challenges present in the role, the team, the business or function, and the organisation. Think of a CEO. Are CEOs faced with the same challenges no matter the business? No, they aren't. So let's see what this might look like. So we have a CEO of a large utilities company. This company has been struggling in the economic environment, and their supply costs are increasingly high. Many of the employees have been in seat for a long time, and there is a culture of conflict. Mergers and acquisitions are on the table to join with similar businesses and drive down supply costs while increasing customer footprint. The company is unlikely to see high growth and is looking for stability. So in green, you can see on screen, so nice rhyme for us there, some of the challenges that this particular CEO might be faced with today. Then we might have a CEO of a medium-sized tech company. This company is innovating quickly. They are leading the market. They have top talent in the organisation, and they have really strong growth targets through innovation. They want to be world leaders in what they do. Think Apple in the early days. So here we can see some of the challenges and the context that this CEO might be faced with in blue. So we're looking at the same role. These are both CEOs, but 2 very different organisations, and we're seeing quite drastically different challenges that these 2 CEOs are going to be faced with. If we were preparing future leaders without taking account of the context in which they are going to be operating, you can imagine the likelihood of failure. It's likely to be that the successful CEO in company A would absolutely fail in company B and vice versa. because the qualities that are needed to be successful in each of these contexts is so very different. Now let's think about scenario planning. This is something that organisations I talk to are absolutely taking on board today and really thinking about, because we don't know what the future holds. So we need to plan different scenarios. We need to be agile. So let's say now that I have my bench strength and I'm nurturing this for future leaders. I'm in my medium-sized tech company, the one that we've just talked about, and today we know what is needed of that CEO, but we're forecasting change in the strategy. The company is forecasting actually they're going to go into a slowdown and they don't expect to see the same level of growth as they've experienced in previous years. We can see here some of the challenges that they might be predicting are going to happen in orange. So this is scenario A, and it's a pivot in the business strategy that the organisation might be planning for. But if the business isn't sold, we need to pivot strategy again, and we look for a different scenario. Here you can see a different set of challenges that we might be faced if we're nurturing our bench strength and looking at what challenges might be faced if we see this slowdown and we actually think about selling the organisation. Sorry, I wasn't clear there. So the next scenario is that actually we decide maybe we want to sell the organisation. Maybe that's the answer. That's the scenario that we might need to be planning for. So you can see a different set of challenges that come up here. And we need to be agile in our approach here. We need to think about these different challenges that we might be faced with, and then we need to reflect back on our bench strength. Within our bench strength, we need to have people that we know we can put into position if scenario A happens, but we need to also know that if scenario B happens, who would be our top talent then? So this is how we use our data and our insights to think about the challenges that might happen in different scenarios, and then look at our bench strength to see who we have in place if scenario A happens, if scenario B happens, perhaps there's a scenario C for your organisation. So the future is uncertain. It's really difficult to know what's going to happen. All that we can do is look at the talent in our organisation and plan for these different scenarios to be effective in managing the future and being confident that we have bench strength no matter what happens in the future of our business. So just to bring this research to a close, before we show you how we put this research into action, there are 4 main principles that come out of this context-specific leadership strategy that we're putting in place. As we've discussed, the first is that contextual leadership challenges directly impact a leader's success. So the context that we are going to be faced with will directly impact if we're going to be successful or not. Different leader attributes will predict leaders' success in handling those different challenges. Our third sort of strategy here is one that I haven't talked much about, and perhaps is one that I don't like, because as an IO psychologist, I think that our personal attributes are the most important thing. But actually what we found from our research is that experiences can compensate for suboptimal leader attributes. So what we're saying there is that if you're going to be managing a cross-cultural global organization, having experience of managing a cross-cultural team is going to set you up for success there, over and above having the attributes to deal with that. So it's really critical, again, that when we are preparing our leaders for future roles, when we are preparing our bench strength for these leadership positions, we think about the experiences that they need to gain to be successful when they get into role, and that we start putting them into those experiences. We start putting them into stretch assignments that are aligned to the specific role that they're going to go into, so that they have those experiences in their back pocket, and so that they're better able to be successful once they are in role. And finally, I think we've made this point, but a leader is not a leader is not a leader. One size doesn't fit all. We need to be thinking about specific scenarios, specific leadership profiles, and then asking that question, potential for what? What could your bench strength go on to be successful in? And then nurturing them for those specific roles. So that was a lot about our research, and now I'm going to hand back to talk about how we put this into action.
So thanks, Lucy. Well, this is particularly important for us because really we want to make sure, and we want to talk today about how we do this and how we, as we say, we make it tangible. We bring it to life. So what we have discussed so far, it seems abstract a bit. We have talked about context, about potential for what. We have so many interesting concepts, but it might sound also difficult to bring into your processes. All of this, but this is what we do, and what we are really keen to show you today. On screen, you can see our digital dashboard. We have the system to create the profiles. So the digital dashboards that with all of the 27 leadership challenges that Lucy just presented before. So from these, we identify challenges and we are going to be more relevant for a specific role and to become the leadership profile, to build the leadership profile. So from this, what we do, as you can see, we can create many different tools. We start from assessing our bench strengths against this profile to see really here the personality attributes of people, as well as the experience. That is the other very important, very relevant issue. So to be successful against a leadership profile that we create. So we invite a participant to complete a personality questionnaire, the PQ, as you see here, and at the same time, we ask people to complete an assessment on experience. So this is the other very relevant element. So we bring all of this information together into our digital platform, the digital dashboard that you see on screen now, to compare leaders' challenges with the participant we are considering for a specific role, as you see here on screen. So this really gives us the opportunity, as we said before, to see people not in a static way, but really in a dynamic perspective, comparing different people at different time, different roles, different challenges. So what we can also do, because we have a joint talent management strategy, is look outside the population that we have selected, for example, for to be considered for a specific role. Look if there is anyone else in the organization that could match for the role, for example, that we haven't considered at the beginning, and see these people in different perspectives. So all of the people, as I said before, all of the people that we maybe didn't consider at first, we could find them fitting perfectly. And we call these people the hidden gems of the organization. So, okay, so we are just about the time, but here it's an overview of what is available. So basically, we have the opportunity to build talent dashboards to facilitate ongoing talent view. As we said, for us, it is key really to work on solid analytics, to have the dashboard, to have the data, but to have data that are not static data, but things that we can use and reuse against different challenges as the situation evolves in the organization. We have stakeholder reports, for example, to understand the potential of people, to understand strengths, to leverage or areas of development. We have workforce insight studies to, for example, aggregate results, to view all of these results together, and to understand talent capability and gaps in the organizations, not just for a specific pool, but in the organization, and to take more clear and data-driven decisions. And we have also individual reports. also, that is another key element to foster development decisions, for example, with individuals. So this is all that it is possible, is key things that it's possible to generate. And also, if sorry,
I was just going to add, yeah, I'll just add here. So I think, you know, the ability to take the science around those 27 challenges to then create a profile on a system and then take all of your talent, assess them and see how they match up there is really critical. And I'm just going to flash back a little bit because I'm not sure how well you could see this at the time, but to be able to get all of your bench strength and then look at for this specific role. So here we're talking about the VP of Enviro Sustainability and Internal Selection, a very long title, but a VP role, and then to be able to see who have I got that I could leverage today and put into place and feel really confident that they are able to deal with the challenges that I've identified are going to be relevant for this VP role is absolutely gold dust. And as we said before, to have a 400% success, you know, increase in terms of success rate is not to be sniffed at, but then also to be able to see who do I need to invest in, and then as we've discussed, what's that gap in investment, what experiences do they need to be able to move into leverage today, and then as we've just talked through, we then start looking at what are the stakeholder reports that an individual gets, but also what are those individual reports. And you can see that some of these are online. This is what you're looking at on the right hand side of the screen here, to be able to say these are your strengths for this role that you're going for, but actually these are the experience gaps that you've got. These are the areas that we think that you need to develop in so that when you're in place, we feel really confident that you'll be successful in role. And that could be, you know, a 2-3 year plan to be able to identify these gaps and actually build up that strength and develop people for these specific roles and feel really comfortable that we've assessed the individual, we've assessed the context in which they're going to be operating, and we've identified their strengths, but also their gaps, and given them a pathway to help with their development in that area. Sorry, I just wanted to jump in because it's so valuable, I think, to be able, as IO psychologists, we have all of this data and research, but actually to be able to put this onto a dashboard, a platform, so that you can really see it and make decisions about people at this aggregate and individual level, I think we're finding is just giving organisations so much value today. So worth just sort of hovering over that for a minute. So sorry, I had to jump in there and add that in. And then, you know, finally, this is sort of leading us, I guess, to some of these. What are the implications for HR? You know, we started by saying, how do we put you on a pathway to success? So outrun those statistics of 50% of leaders fail. And you can see that it is about moving from that one-size-fits-all leadership model to a more context-specific profile approach. It's moving from those static leadership programs to actually investing in flexible leadership programs. What does John need versus Sarah to be able to move into a future role? But also, how do we become agile in terms of scenario planning so that we're not just building people up for specific roles, but we're actually saying as the market moves, as our business strategy changes, how do we build bench strength that we know can adapt and can fulfill no matter what scenario fails to be. And then it's about moving on intuition. And honestly, if you're in that place today where a lot of your leadership decisions are based on intuition, are based on manager ratings, or are based on HR decisions that aren't including data, that's not an unfamiliar place to be. We see lots of organizations in that place today. But actually, most organizations know that there's better, more valid, more fair and data-driven ways of doing that. And we have that at our fingertips, and we can do it at scale now. So these are really the implications for HR that we're seeing of how do we get on top of some of these challenges. And so, as you can see, and we've talked about, the approach that we take at SHL is really about bringing this together to use the power of data to inform all of your talent management decisions, so that if you are starting at individual contributor level and you're looking at who wants to move up an organisation, but also who wants to squiggle or move around an organisation, you have that and you can make the right decisions about who to put onto leadership development programmes, who is identified as high potential, and then ultimately potential for what are those profiles that you're building people up for, what are the contexts in which they are actually going to operate, and having that all on one platform so that all of your talent data and information sits in one place allows us to have this really joined up approach to talent management. So that unfortunately does bring us towards the end of our session today. We'll just pause to take on some of the questions, and appreciate we have had some questions come through. So one of the questions, what are you seeing there with the questions?
Well, we have some interesting questions, so maybe we can start answering to some of them. For example, we have a question around to what extent does SHL use tools to support successions in other key critical roles and leadership positions? Well, this is interesting because as we said, it's key to rely on data, to to use some tools, to use something that it's that gives us the opportunity really to have more scientific information on people, and this is really to support the organization, to support business leaders also to take decisions. So we use this kind of tools for many different roles. So we are not just talking about the CEO positions, we are talking about many different roles. We have started saying that we talking about talent management, we are talking about something that should start, our approaches should start from the beginning. So from the talents that comes arrives into the organization, we should get to know them and to identify who can be the leaders of tomorrow. So not just using this kind of tools for the leaders role. So absolutely we use this kind of tools, or different tools, but in any way we really believe that there are stronger and more scientific approach. Again, analytics is key to get more to get more confident decision at the end, because we have seen, and we've seen it every day with the organization I work with, that the risk of a wrong decision is really it can have a huge impact, both in big organization, large organization, but also in small organization. So this is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And another question that's come on that we've been asked is, this is specifically to do with the slide around the contextual insights. And the question is, what about measuring learnability within given environments? And so really critical question. We sometimes talk about it as learning agility, that who has got the ability to actually take on new things, that's going to adopt technology quickly, that's going to learn new things, that's going to want to keep growing. We might refer to it as a growth mindset. All of those types of things. So how do we measure that? How do we take that into account? Because across the board, that tends to correlate really well with moving up an organization to actually identifying people as high potential. We do tend to look at, do they have learning agility? Do they have that growth mindset? So that's something that we capture with the OPQ, the occupational personality questionnaire that we put on screen earlier. And that's about assessing individuals and identifying, do they have that ability to sort of take on and learn? Do they look at that at a little bit of an earlier stage rather than necessarily succession planning? So it tends to fall more into our high potential identification and be a key requisite to actually being identified as high potential. Do they have the ability to be able to learn? Also key to the high potential pieces, do they to learn? Do they want to become a future leader? Because we put quite a lot of pressure on our bench strength population, on our high potentials. It's quite a stretching task that they have to take on. Many people today just don't want to be a future leader. So that's something that we tend to assess at that high potential stage, to say, do they have the ability to learn? Do they want to learn? Are they motivated to go out and learn? And once we know that, that tends to decide if they go on to become a high potential. And then off the back of that, we tend to look at potential for what? And that's when we move into more of this succession planning and contextual leadership framework. And what else are we seeing?
Well, to connect to what you were just saying, there is an interesting question that says technicians and blue collars are less interested spending time in tests, which customers are using similar approach, talking about high potential leadership position in this kind of context. And to me, it's very interesting, and it connects absolutely to what you were just saying. To my experience, I've been working a lot with manufacturing, so technicians and the blue collars as well. And I see the power of this approach also with this population. It's true, maybe they're less used to take tests or to do this kind of approach, but using the right tools for these people, it really makes a difference, because we know that, and I've seen from my experience that especially for this kind of position, the organization tends to promote who is the most, let's say, reliable person, or who is the person that has the knowledge, the technical knowledge. But then we see the impact of this, of promoting people without looking at the real potential, leadership potential, to become a team leader, to become a leader in manufacturing. So the fact we see every day that most people don't have the also the motivation to go in a different position, in a higher position in those kind of contexts. So even more in this context, it's important to use some data, some tools to make sure that we really get into the potential, and we are not biased by the technical knowledge. And it works. I mean, from my experience, it really works, and it really makes the difference if we want to change the organization.
Okay, I think we've got time for probably one more question, and actually I'm going to pick up on this one because I think it's quite interesting. But somebody is saying it's more of a comment than a question, and this was to do with the poll question that we asked earlier. But they're just stating that actually we have more than one answer for this. So the point is that since our ambition is to have diverse talent bench, for this we need to both to grow talents internally, but also bring in new talents where this is required due to business reasons. Really interesting point, and critical, I think, is that, yeah, within HR, we're not necessarily doing one thing to answer some of these big challenges of who's going to be the next future leader. We will be both buying in talent as well as growing talent. I think one of the things that we can start to do a little bit better is to understand better the talent that is in the business, so that we can see the gaps. Where do we need to buy in talent because we genuinely don't have the talent within the business, versus actually we've got the talent in the business but we haven't recognized it, or it hasn't been put forward onto a list that our leaders have gone away and scribbled down on a or tap the shoulder approach that we tend to see happens. You know, we could have talent in the organization that's being overlooked if we aren't intentional about how we're gathering talent in the business. But absolutely, there are going to be times that we need to buy in talent.
Here's what I found.
Oh, my phone piping in there. But you know, this is a critical piece. Is, you know, there's both buying talent and developing talent, but it's about being able to know where are the gaps so that we can do that very intentionally. But yes, absolutely, take that point on board. You're absolutely right. There isn't a one answer to some of these poll questions, so completely understand that. So with that, we have come to the end of our webinar today. I would just like to say a big thank you to everybody for joining us today, for all of your questions, for participating in the poll, and for taking the time out of your day to come and listen to what our research is telling us about succession planning, and how hopefully we can do that a little bit better in the future. As I've mentioned earlier, the webinar has been recorded, and we will share this with you in a follow-up email. So a big thank you from both of us today.
Thanks. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you.